welcome to Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. We're only going to have perspectives and personalities today. Thank God we let off the politicians for at least a few minutes. Oh, boy. Well, I almost got there again. We usually start Tom and Alexis Viewpoint with a kudo or two or three. Today we'll just talk about the musicians in our county. They've been putting on some great concerts at the Latham Park band shell there. And, you know, they don't just show up and sit down and play. They put a lot of time in for rehearsal. And so kudos to them and a thank you to them. And in that same vein, we hope to go over to Mount Pulaski tonight if we don't get rained out. Those folks over there in Vinegar Hill, their group is putting on a great band concert. They're calling it Americana. So if you don't have anything to do, grab a lawn chair and go over to Vinegar Hill tonight and go up there.
And maybe an umbrella.
Yeah, maybe an umbrella or a poncho. But in any event, congratulations and kudos to those folks over there in Vinegar Hill. Well, this morning we're going to talk about, I want you to pay strict attention, boys and girls. We're going to talk about the birds and the bees this morning. And to lead that conversation off, I will let Mrs. Busby introduce our guests who are experts in bees and birds.
Well, you've probably scared both listeners off by now.
Yeah, both of you listeners, turn up the volume or turn the radio off. Could get interesting.
I have a friend named Alexis Asher, and for years she wanted to be a beekeeper. And now she are one. And with her is her brains and brawn, she calls him, Tom Cross. And Alexis and
he
Tom...
crosses the bees.
He crosses the bees. There you go. And it's a labor-intensive job, for one thing. But, you know, who'd ever thought we'd run short of bees? But that's become rather an issue across the country, that the bees are dying because of the herbicides, pesticides, well, not the herbicides, the pesticides.
Yeah. I wanted bees for years and years, and Tom had bees for years and years and then gave them up because he has a daughter that is allergic.
Oh boy, that's
so,
a bad sign. Yeah.
I was talking to the extension office a couple of years ago and said, I really want to go to that bees thing, and John said, yeah, you've always talked about that. Well, here's a chance. And I got the opportunity a year ago to go to a series of lessons, I guess, by the extension down in Springfield. And I went every Wednesday night for, I don't know, Lent, and learned how to do it. And so I came home the first night and said to my husband, well, not only is this expensive, but this is hard work. And I called Don Batterton up, I called Tom up, and I started asking a lot more questions. And the thing was that they had more stuff than they needed, and suddenly things appeared at my house and the excuses started going away. So I did get a package of bees, and we were just talking about a package of bees. There's your first expense. It's $100 for a package of bees.
And that's...
Now what do they do is just go out there with nets and swoop them out of the sky and bring them in for
No. The bees that the beekeepers in Illinois use come in packages, and they are from a man who has hives in California for the almond blossoms, a great big commercial entity that's up in one of the Dakotas. And so he has all these bees that multiply out in California, and they split them all and bring them all back. And when they split them all, they make these packages, and you can buy these packages. So it starts your hive.
That's pretty esoteric stuff.
Sometimes Georgia, Mississippi, Florida, all across the South. That's another source of income for them, to sell packages to us up here.
That's really. I might add, in case you have picked up on something, folks, Mrs. Asher is not a native of Scully Prairie. We should point that out. And we're happy, have been happy ever since that girl dropped her foot here in Scully Prairie. By the way, you're the second beekeeper in Hartsburg, insofar as I know. Nick Hammer preceded you.
I'm sure he preceded me in a lot of things.
Yeah, he was in in the 1930s. He used to raise bees there on the corner right across from the high school.
Yeah. He also went to the Methodist church that has just closed and was our janitor for many, many years.
Oh,
too.
is that right?
Yeah.
Well, you've
that's
known
another
him
story.
a long time.
I never knew him. I just know this reputation around Hartsburg about Nick Hammer.
Well, apparently bees must enjoy wherever they're planted. If you can get them from California and they're happy in Illinois.
I think there is a heat about them, as my brother-in-law says. The end of a bee is warm. And they make their own heat in their own house. So wherever they are, they do well. Because even in the winter, the inside of their hive is very warm.
So let's take it from the top, as they say in showbiz. So you had this burning desire to be a beekeeper, if that's the correct terminology, and you got started, and all of a sudden this stuff started throwing. So all these things came at your house, and then a package of bees, 20,000 or whatever it was in a package. We kind of guesstimated that off air.
3 pounds.
So, 3 pounds. Okay, that kind of defines it.
That'd be
3
a lot of
pounds.
bees.
So, Alexis, what happened from that point on? Let's start from there.
You've got to go somewhere and pick these bees up. So Don drove down to the other side of Springfield, and Tom would have a pound, and I would have a pound, and Don Batterton would have a pound. And so we had all these bees in the back end of the car, and we drove home. And then you bring them back, and when you buy a package, it's a little enclosure with them in, and hanging inside that is a little tiny enclosure with the queen in. And they're all around her,
Yes.
keeping her warm and bonding, so that when you put them into your hive, then you put the queen still in her little container, you knock the little wooden pellet out and put a marshmallow in there, and tightly, and you hang her in the bee on a bee frame, and then you shake the rest of your bees into this bee frame, and they will, over the next 24 hours, encourage her and help her eat this marshmallow, and they do too, because it's pure sugar, and that's what they live on. And she releases herself, and because they have been with her a long time, they accept her automatically, and the whole system of the beehive starts to work. She is the layer of eggs, and they will start making a hive comb for her to lay the eggs in, and that's how it gets going.
It's
I'm
a
just sitting here
miracle.
slack-jawed.
Yeah, really. I knew this was going to be a good program. I was just very excited about it. Now, everybody has a job. She lays eggs.
She lays eggs, and all the females are the workers. And
Yes.
the few males called drones that live in the hive, but she can lay a drone egg. They're nothing. They're just superfluous.
So be it. What's new about that?
They just are doing nothing. In fact, when the end of the year comes, they start getting kicked out. They're nothing. They don't make the winter.
Tom,
they
Alexis,
don't.
can you pick a we got a swarm of bees around here. Can you pick a queen out of there?
Yes, you can.
She's physically looks different.
Is that right? Well, you got to have awfully good eyes.
Yeah, you have to hunt. I can't see them every time, but every
Well,
time I
aren't
look.
the others drawn to her as well?
Yes.
Wouldn't she be the center of attraction? Does that help?
That helps a little. Yeah. They're fascinating creatures. You can't ever learn everything there is to know.
Tom, how did you get into this?
I kept finding swarms of bees on the trees or on the corn stalks in the fields, and I thought I ought to be doing something with these. So so I started out with a captured swarm that was in the springtime on a stalk of corn in the bean field.
How does one capture?
And I put it in a plywood box. Pulled it out by the roots and dumped them in a plywood.
You stopped.
Swarming is the natural reproduction of a colony of bees. When I was a kid on the school bus, there was a basswood tree close to the bridge by Lawns Bridge, and I would see the bees circling around that tree. We're riding the school bus.
And did you
I just
develop
looked
an
at 'em.
interest then?
So I guess it's just a natural
Kind of
interest.
piqued a little interest
Yeah,
in you?
yeah.
I'll be darned.
Now, when you took
I have
this,
too many hobbies, this man.
It's all right. You'll always be busy.
when you took the swarm and put it in the plywood box, did you have a hive to put them in, or
No, I put them in a plywood box, and then I ran into Charlie Ott in the Big R parking
Oh,
lot. And
yeah.
and he said, "No, you're not really supposed to do that. You're supposed to have movable frames." And he had some advice and some suggestions.
well, you went to the right guy,
Yeah,
didn't you?
yeah, and I,
Yeah, well, he did that a
connected
long
to the
time ago.
And I was aware of the fact that I was supposed to be registered.
Oh,
They're inspected by for disease control. They've been inspected since the 20s or longer. Just sort of like hog cholera and diseases that go through livestock, because bees technically are in a lot of ways, are livestock.
Can a guy who's knowledgeable about that tell that a bee or bees are diseased by looking
yeah.
at them?
has it
Isn't it
happened ever
amazing?
to you?
Last year.
I'll
We
be
had
darned.
mites last year.
Yeah.
And we found them in the drone. We had an outcrop on the comb of drone, and we knocked one of them, and you can see a little red dot, and that's the mite.
Oh, that has to be a microscopic thing too.
It's
I'd never
bright
make
red
it.
on
I'd never make it.
A little bigger than the period at the end of a sentence, I would say, average.
So what do you do?
It's
You
like
can't-
it would be like if you had a flea on you that was the size of a rat, is the way I've heard it described.
Did you dust them, or how do you?
You can send away for stuff, and we did, and it's in a little carton. You pull the top back off it, and you lay it on the top of your frames, and it has an odor of eucalyptus, and we think that's the carrier around the hive, and it slowly, I would imagine, gets ingested into the bees, and then it kills off the mites.
Does that take very long?
14 days.
Something like that.
14 days.
Now,
Varroa mites have only been around for 20, 25 years. Back in the olden days, it was easy to be a beekeeper, and then the Varroa mite appeared, and that's part of the reason, part of a complex of diseases and pests that is part of all the talk about disappearing honeybees.
Disappearing of honeybees.
I think that's a little overstressed.
Well, I'm glad to know that. You don't really.
Yeah, but what it amounts to is bees take more management than they used to because of, and that's true of,
Well,
ash trees,
evolution's the good
ash
news and
trees
the bad news.
or monoculture in the corn and beans, and that type of thing. That's true of anything. any
Well,
crop.
Alexis, are the numbers of beekeeper, would that be your correct name?
We are a
Yeah.
beekeeper.
All right. Would the number of beekeepers be dwindling here in Illinois, or is it coming back? Where are we in this status?
I would say it's increasing.
It's
Increasing.
There's been a dramatic,
And that's a good thing, isn't it?
dramatic increase in the interest in bees in the last 5 to 10 years, and probably because of all the emphasis in the press about colony collapse disorder.
Yes.
Am I saying that right?
I think so.
The press, they have a tendency to get things wrong once in a while. In case you hadn't heard that.
But the University
But you
of
will hear
Illinois,
fair and balanced here.
Yeah.
the University of Illinois and the Beekeepers, Illinois Beekeepers Association are trying very hard. There are 4 men that do an excellent job in this series of lessons that I went to that really are promoting keeping bees, and every year they have at least 36 or more people that come to these I think 30 or more that come, and they are looking at you as a viable thing. You're going to keep bees. They want you to keep bees.
And they're your go-to people when you have problems
Sure.
for knowledge and
Yeah.
and help.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and they are really helpful. And if we go to we belong to the Beekeepers Association. We go down to meetings in Springfield, and you tend to learn odds and ends from people. So, the most interesting thing is, as somebody said to me, it's just cheap therapy. You just
Yes.
The more you open your hive, the more you learn the things that you see. And you get guts from it.
Now you put on a screen and you cure the little smoke dispenser and so forth, and is that to just calm the bees as they swarm around you while you're working with them. The smoke just calms them, doesn't?
Yes.
No damage at all to them. It just kind of it's an anesthetic.
Their defense reaction to smelling smoke, they think the tree's on fire in the forest, and they
tell you that?
And the bee will go to an open cell of honey and fill their stomach with honey in case the tree burns down and they have to fly away. So it's a defensive response.
That's a miracle.
Yeah.
So
To a forest fire.
when you
Yeah.
open them up, then you find a lot of bees have half their body inside part of a comb.
So it's a distraction.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah,
Mother Nature at work.
yeah.
Well, now there's the economics of this. This is not inexpensive to get started. There's some upfront money there. Now
There is. And if you do not have friends, it can be quite expensive.
Oh, I'm sure.
Your hive can be anywhere up to $300 depending on the state you want it to receive it from the producer. You've got to buy the bees, and there is your time. You just can't put them out in your backyard and pretend they're not going to, they'll look after themselves. There's a bit of time involved.
then what happens then? Ultimately, you harvest the honey.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky.
Now wait a minute. Let's just go back to that. If you're lucky.
What makes you lucky?
Why doesn't every hive produce honey?
Well, you need to build your hive up first. And you've got to have a thriving hive to make enough population that they grow enough and fill their the frames that hold the comb in, so they've got enough population. All right, we've got this kind of population, we can go, and then your hive moves up, and you could have a place where they will make honey. So your boxes are big hive boxes. You need one or two of those. And then you have a queen excluder, which is like a bit of metal grating that the queen cannot get through, but the honeybees can get through.
The workers, yeah.
So the workers go up into the next one, and it's a little box. It's called a super, and they make honey in there. So you need a population. So they know that need to grow and grow and grow.
Why do they not want the queen to go into these honey?
Well, you don't want brood in your honey. You want it just to be clear honey. So you don't want babies, and you don't want all those other things.
They leave the hive and they go out in the clover field or wherever and do their thing out there and graze, so to speak. How do you get them back?
Well, I'm not very good at citing
you put GPS
statistics,
on them to get them
but
back?
there's I'm not sure how many thousand trips it takes, but you can imagine the size of a stomach in a bee. Every trip, they go to visit a flower, gather the nectar, bring it back to the hive. The moisture content is too high, so it has to be placed in a cell, and it has to be dehydrated to 18% moisture. And honey won't ferment, and it won't deteriorate if it's at 18% moisture. But nectar from a flower will deteriorate.
Well, they claim
So the weather affects how many flowers are available, how many weeds are blooming, how much white clover is blooming, what the fruit trees are doing, a frost. That all affects the number of flowers per acre. And a bee will basically go up to 3 miles in any direction from the location of the hive is about their range.
And 3 mile radius.
Yeah, which is thousands of acres. I think 40,000 acres in 3 miles.
You let your bees go over to Cousin Gary's, do you?
They do, yeah.
They come into town too, but now we have our own, so we don't need his anymore.
Do you build your hives, or are those something you have to purchase with all the
As much as
bee
possible,
layers?
I make as much of my own equipment as I can. But I enjoy the woodworking, so
Yeah, there you go.
So that's another hobby.
Yeah.
And Donna and I sent away for 2 big bodies this year. There's a big company in Hamilton, Illinois, on the river, on the west side of the state, called The Dance, and we sent away for a cheap wooden one. Don put it together, and we painted it with enamel paint, and that works too. But you don't want to be doing that too much. You want to hope that you have friends and neighbors.
You were blessed.
Yes.
Yes, you
Well,
were.
you know, we have here in this community some busy bees who service us, and they are called our sponsors. So we'll defer to them right now, and then we'll bring Mr. Ash back as he flies back out of the comb. Right back live in the studios here. The program is Viewpoint each Wednesday morning. Long years ago, many years ago, my mother sat me down and taught me about the birds and the bees. I think she'd have been more comfortable if she'd had the subject matter that Judy and I had
Oh,
this
yes.
morning.
My good. As a registered professional mother, I can assure you.
We're
she would
talking
be.
about the birds and the bees. And the bottom line on that is we're talking about the honey we put on our toast. And that's the essence of it. Tom Cross and Alexis Asher are with us this morning. Right in our own backyard, we didn't know we had such a botanical, not botanical, that's not the word, such folks who are so knowledgeable in the raising of bees. Started from scratch, so to speak. Where are we in the, Alexis, in the lexicon of advancement? You just started, how long ago?
I only started 18 months ago.
18 months ago, year and a half. Tom, you've been in it a lot longer.
At least 15 years, off and on, yeah.
Yes. Now, have you made any money on it?
Occasionally, some years.
By
Got $1 that one year.
Yeah.
Because if you count a couple of dollars over the red, you're.
I sell some honey occasionally. I
But
have in the past.
it's obviously something that consumes you insofar as not necessarily a hobby per se, but in your case, Alexis, that's kind of what it.
Mine is a hobby.
Uh-huh.
There were no bees other than Tom's coming to town. We had, when he stopped, we noticed a great decline in bees in Hartsburg, and there were a few bumblebees for a couple of years. Then it started again. There was nothing, and I thought, this is silly. I really want this, and we should have bees. So that's why my interest peaked again. I would have bees, and
Right.
now it's nice to see them. You walk around town and you see them.
Yeah.
Well, there's a bee in her bonnet that really paid some dividends. Now, we talked about weather a while ago, and how bees generate their own heat. And Tom, you alluded to the fact that when it's really cold weather, that the bees in the hives change places physically.
They will
those
cluster.
on the inside,
Yeah.
those on the inside move to the outside, and those on the outside move to the inside to get the warmth.
And move their muscles, flex their muscles to generate their own heat, or the heat of digestion, or.
Well, yeah. Okay, Mabel wants in.
Oh, is it? I'm sorry. That's my job.
We're going to open the door and let the bee in here.
Sometimes
now-
she comes through the vents. Once she brought a live bird with her.
Jody didn't do very well on that. That cat brought that bird in that channel and dropped the bird out of its mouth and flew around here. Judy didn't do well at all. Now, with the bees, what about a driving rainstorm?
They'll be inside.
They will go inside automatically, as nature tells them to.
A drop is bigger than they are,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
so
They're tiny.
They're tiny. They're small. They can sting and hurt you, but they're tiny.
Yeah.
So
I think their lifespan is interesting summer as opposed to winter, too.
yeah. So if this queen produces, she makes a small whatever, and it grows within 20, depending whether it is a worker bee, a drone bee, or a queen bee cell. It can be 25 to 27 days, and is formed. And straight away, this small bee is working. And if it would be a worker bee, she's going to work like really hard all summer. She could be gone in 6 weeks. But if she's born towards the end of summer, she's going to live through the winter if you're lucky. And basically what they're doing is then swarming in the hive, making a little cocoon, and they're eating the reserves that you've left in the hive body to live on, and they will move very slowly around that hive, won't they? If they've the brains, they'll move slowly around the hive where there is food and live there as a little clustered form. So, as Tom alluded to, then therefore the cold ones come in, the warm ones go out, and that movement is happening all the time. But no brood is being made at that point. They're just existing. They're making heat.
Yeah. Now, how long does the queen live?
She can live 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And she can produce that.
Long live the queen.
Up to 4 or 5.
Long live the queen.
Yeah.
Now
Even
then,
4 or 5.
do the worker bees decide that it's time that we have a new queen in this hive?
Yeah, she's not producing. And if she's not producing, they know it. Because there's no work. Yeah, menopause.
So is she exiled?
It's all sort of controlled by pheromones produced by the queen. Which is a complicated, I don't understand the subject completely, but absolutely.
Well, listeners understand every bit of it.
Yeah, difficult to explain, but it's, if a queen's failing and laying fewer eggs, the workers are aware of it, and they will initiate a new queen by feeding extra royal jelly, a special queen food, to us. They'll choose a cell and raise a replacement queen. And that's when a hive will swarm.
Okay.
So we had a swarm this year. And where my bees are, where the hives are, the farmer where they're on Steve Leisman's land, he rang me up and he said, your bees are swarming. So I rang Tom, and sure enough, they were, and he dropped everything and came and helped me. And we captured that swarm into a new box.
So so they're swarming wherever, and you, how did you capture them?
We put
them in another in another box, so that that will be their home then.
Yes.
How do you use a big net?
They happened to be about 2.5 feet off the ground, and I was just able to just set a box underneath of them and gently brush them off, and they fell off and landed in the box.
And
the swarm stays with the queen.
Yeah.
Queen leaves the hive. Sometimes it's the old queen, sometimes it's a new queen.
Who leaves?
Who leaves the old hive, Imagine a wild colony of honeybees in a tree, hollow tree in the woods someplace. In a hollow tree. That's their only method of reproduction, is to swarm. They divide and part of them leave. They raise a new queen.
Now, if there's a swarm of bees around a hive, can you tell a worker bee? How does one know this is a worker bee and this is a drone?
The drones are bigger than the worker bee.
They're visibly different. Yeah.
They are visibly different.
Yeah.
Yes. And the queen is bigger than the drone again.
How do they make royal jelly as opposed to the honey?
That's a good question. The worker bees are divided into a caste system, and they I'm not positive how they make it.
I think they produce it when they need to, only when they need to.
How do they decide which zygote or whatever it is in the honeycomb should be the next queen? So they're going to feed that to her.
That's another one of those things that's being studied by people with PhDs.
That leaves me out.
That's not us.
That's the part of the birds and bees you never understood.
That's the part.
Now, when we produce honey, and old Uncle Nick used to bring us honey all the time. He'd come to the front door with honey, and my dad'd go out the back door. But that's another story.
He was scared?
No, it was just, if you knew Nick, you'd understand that. In any event, how do you harvest these combs of honey? And if you want to market them, what do you do? How do you do that? And do you get paid? Not very much, of course, but what quantities determine how you get paid?
So let me start.
Go ahead.
Last year, I was taught at the sessions I went to that the first year, if you made any honey, you paid everybody back that helped you.
Okay, fair
So
enough.
all my honey last year went to a lot of men in Hartsburg that had been very kind to me and helped me out.
Oh, nice.
So, and I didn't get a lot because I wasn't established much. So that was my answer. Go ahead. If you make honey,
If I make honey, there are frames in the boxes, and each frame is capped, and you slice off the caps and put the frames in another special piece of equipment called an extractor, which I was very fortunate. I inherited equipment from people who had kept bees and don't keep bees anymore, and so I got their old equipment for a very reasonable price. And so you slice off the frames and you put them in inside a tub, in a basket inside a tub, and you spin them around at high speed, and the centrifugal force throws the honey out of each individual honeycomb cell. You slides down the side of the tub.
We all know what a honeycomb is. You've seen them, maybe 4 or 5 inches square, or something like that. Maybe not that big. And centrifugal force extracts the honey from the inside of those cells that we're talking about.
Yes.
Isn't it? Now then, that's in a raw farm. Where does that go?
There's a market for raw honey. There's also a market for commercial honey that you buy in the stores. Has been filtered. It's usually heated, because heating the honey prevents crystallization. Honey will crystallize.
Yeah, it will.
Absolutely.
And if you heat it to a certain temperature, that will help slow down the crystallization process.
Now, when you talk about cutting the caps off the combs, that's the caps that we see if we buy comb honey?
If you buy comb honey is made on a special foundation, a special sheet of wax.
Where's wax come from?
Actually, the beekeeping companies buy the wax, render it, and sell it back to the beekeepers.
Okay.
so you put an inch of comb of this little wax at the top, and they build the comb down. They do it. It's marvelous. It's marvelous to watch. It's marvelous to see. Don and I don't extract honey. We did comb honey last year, and we cut it into portions. And this year we have a special thing to cut it out and put it in little special boxes.
Is he getting kind of hooked too?
Don likes the whole idea from a long way away.
I see.
He's not interested in being anywhere near them, and nor is my landlord either. So so it's kind of fun. They're distant relatives almost.
Isn't that the berries?
Yeah, and again, when we're talking about expense, just the buying the jacket with the hood on it, and things like that. Things you've got to really consider, because you would not think of this expense until you started going somewhere and finding out about it.
Hobbies have a way of doing that to one.
They do. They grow
do,
on you,
yeah.
and you buy the relative things for them.
Sure.
Yeah, I know of a president of a certain well-known college in Lincoln who's building a model airplanes for remote control, and that's very, very involved, and he's doing a whale of a job, and it's a big one. Right now he's working on a B-25, which was a World War II bomber, and he's working very delicate work, some of it, and you really are dedicated. Tell me about the when this honey's extracted and it goes to in the process, the chain of retail chain. You extract this honey, and it goes where then, Tom?
You sell yours locally.
If you were a big enough beekeeper to have barrels of honey Some beekeepers are big
Really?
enough that they extract honey and store it in tanks or 55-gallon barrels.
Well, won't it
There's wholesale buyers. There are
won't it
retail buyers.
crystallize in those barrels?
Well, that's why some of them heat it at that point. At the extraction point, at some point, it will be heated to prevent crystallization.
When did they start?
But it could be. You can either be. I consider myself a hobbyist but I like for my bees to earn their own keep, so I do try to sell some.
Fair enough.
But the along with the interest in colony collapse disorder, there's also an interest in natural foods and organic foods and everything else that has really and people like local honey because there's an idea that local pollen is good for allergies.
That's interesting.
Alexis, as a newcomer, so to speak, in this little industry, at what point in time do you think that you will get to the point where the bees will own their own keep, so to speak?
I don't think they ever will. I don't think
You're a true hobbyist.
I am.
Yeah.
I did not start it to sell honey. I do not want a sign outside our door that says honey for sale.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to be able to give it away, and I enjoy it, and I enjoy the fact that my neighbor said to his daughter, my cucumbers were not setting on flowers, but Alexis's bees came down one day. And if that's what we have around town, you know.
And you have lots of flowers.
And we have lots of flowers in Hartsburg. We have some very nice gardens in Hartsburg. And if you have no pollinators, you don't have these things. We have excellent fruit trees in Hartsburg. And you just don't realize that till you walk around as a beekeeper and you think, that's blooming and that's good.
And there's a reason for that.
And there's a reason for that. And when all my bees were in my neighbor's tree this spring, and I walked to church one morning and the whole tree is just buzzing like the inside of a hive. That's your payment back for it.
Yes. You were talking about beekeepers in the 20s. Now, when did they start licensing and having you take classes so that you knew what you were doing? And
when
the
did Big Brother stick his nose in your business?
Well, I'm not sure. That would be. I better not guess. That would be a guess. But I would say at least 100 years.
But you have to be licensed to do what you're doing.
No, you
Not
just
really.
simply registered.
I see. As opposed to licensing.
Yeah.
And we are checked here.
And we are.
But somebody comes around and
there is a
checks with
state
you.
bee inspector.
And of course, that to help to you to have somebody who's knowledgeable or more knowledgeable than you about it. Maybe not Tom. He'd been in it a while.
No, he came last year, and we learned more last year. With that chap, spent the morning with us with both our hives, and we learned a lot last year just from that man coming and checking our hives.
That is John Fulton of the apiaries.
Yes.
Yeah. What are the pitfalls, Alexis and Tom?
You could be finished tomorrow morning.
Disease hit your hives?
Yeah.
It's discouraging if they die over the winter, if they don't
Because of the weather, would it be, or
well,
because...
it could be the weather, it could be you have to be careful. You know, we're taking the surplus honey. We're not, but we're supposed to leave them enough honey to survive the winter.
Well,
So you have to make a judgment. Well, how do you know how hard a winter we're going to have next winter?
It is discouraging to find out you've got mites when you thought you were the cleanest hive in the county. Well, a drone goes out and visits with a distant relative down the road and brings that home, just like a kid brings cold home.
Sure.
So you've got mites. You've no idea. We register our hives so that the people that spray know where they are. You'd no idea who's spraying what around you if you weren't aware of things. So like the day we had the bees went and we caught them, and then they had the swarm, and Tom said, "Well, today we're rich. Tomorrow they could be gone." We could sell those if we wanted to. We could sell those on. The bees make enough honey. We could sell that on. It's not always the case.
You talk about the bee hives being clean. How do you clean a beehive? Or
Very
don't
carefully.
you?
Very
Yes,
carefully.
yes, I'm sure.
Actually, they keep their own beehive very carefully
Yes.
clean. It's amazing how clean they are.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, there is a whole ecosystem within the hive that we have,
Caste system.
and a caste system that we have no idea about.
And,
Now, by
but they determine which caste this
Sort of by
particular
age.
bee is
the,
going
the
to
youngest bees are house bees, nurse bees. They tend to the young. They make wax. Young bees make wax. They just have to sit on the wall and generate wax. Eat honey and generate wax.
Now,
And tend to the young and clean. And there's undertaker bees, and then as they get older, they become pollen gatherers, and because that's the activity with the most highest accident and death rate.
Oh, sure.
You know, toads will sit outside of a beehive and eat the bees as they come and go.
Too.
Oh, I suppose.
I want to ask one question before that clock got there already. Because of common interest, there are other folks in the county in this area who do what you do. And you get together periodically, ad hoc group, and just exchange ideas and problems and so forth?
There
Not
are
really.
multiple clubs around the state. There's one in the McLean County, and we happen to go to the one in Sangamon County. But it's
That's this
and there's a
association you
state
were referring
association.
to?
Yes.
Our guests this morning have been Alexis Asher and Tom Cross, doing some very interesting things here in Golden County, right over there in Scully Prairie at Hartsburg. Kind of amazing to Judith and I. That is it's another hobby, and a pretty esoteric one, and one that's requires just an awful lot of hands-on work. So we appreciate your spending your time with us this morning, Alexis and Tom. We always try to close with a quote that I found somewhere along the line about the subject matter of the day, and I found one that says, bees aren't as busy as they seem, they just can't stop buzzing. Thank you very much, Alexis and Tom.
Thank you very much.
Make